All right. Hello, everyone. Apologies for the delayed start. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is Left Bank Books welcomes master storyteller and crime fiction legend Gary Phillips, who will discuss one of Crime Read's most anticipated books of 2022 on the official launch day, One Shot Harry. And tonight, Phillips will be in conversation with another Phillips, St. Louis's noir master, Scott Phillips. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Gary and Scott, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We offer in-store shopping, curbside pickup, and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a copy for you or for your friends on our website, left-bank.com. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to continue bringing you such incredible authors as the authors that we are presenting this evening. I want to thank you so much for your support. I'm Shane Mullen. I am the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. We produce hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so you can type your questions as a comment, and you can do that at any point in time as you think about it throughout the event. Be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events, as well as, I am so happy to say that we are hosting in-person events as well. So if you are in the St. Louis area, or even if you're not, a lot of our in-person events will have a virtual aspect. Make sure to check out our calendar. And now, about tonight's book, One Shot Harry. Race and civil rights in 1963 Los Angeles provide a powerful backdrop in Gary Phillips' riveting historical crime novel about an African-American forensic photographer seeking justice for a friend. Perfect for fans of Walter Mosley, James Ellroy, and George Pelecanos. Los Angeles, 1963. African-American Korean War veteran Harry Ingram earns a living as a news photographer and occasional process server, chasing police radio calls and dodging baseball bats. With racial tensions running high on the eve of Martin Luther King's Freedom Rally, Ingram risks becoming a victim at every crime scene he photographs. When Ingram hears about a deadly automobile accident on his police scanner, he recognizes the vehicle described as belonging to his good friend and old army buddy, a white jazz trumpeter. The LAPD declares the car crash an accident, but when Ingram develops his photos, he sees signs of foul play. Ingram feels compelled to play detective, even if it means putting his own life on the line. Armed with his wits, his camera, and occasionally his Colt 45, One Shot Harry plunges headfirst into the seamy underbelly of LA society, tangling with racists, leftists, gangsters, zealots, and lovers, all in the hope of finding something resembling justice for a friend. Master storyteller and crime fiction legend Gary Phillips has filled the pages of One Shot Harry with fascinating historical cameos, wisecracks, tenderness, and an edge-of-your-seat thrill ride of a plot with consequences far beyond one dead body. This is a Crime Read's most anticipated book of 2022, She Read's most anticipated mystery novels of 2022, and a Library Journal editor's pick for spring of 2022, among many others. I hope it's on your list. Alex Segura, the author of Secret Identity, Blackout, and Miami Midnight, says, "Few books are able to capture the essence and vibe of classic, hard-boiled fiction and still manage to make the prose feel modern and of the moment. Gary Phillips does just that with One Shot Harry and the memorable titular protagonist Harry Ingram. This book is a swift uppercut of gritty storytelling that will keep you hungrily turning the pages, loaded with moments that will linger in your mind long after you've finished reading." And now about our speakers this evening. Gary Phillips has published novels, comics, novellas, short stories, and edited or co-edited several anthologies, including the Anthony Award-winning The Obama Inheritance, 15 Stories of Conspiracy Noir. Almost 30 years after its publication, his debut, Violent Spring, was named one of the essential crime novels of Los Angeles. He also was a story editor on Snowfall, an FX show about crack and the CIA in 1980s South Central, where he grew up. And tonight he will be in conversation with Scott Phillips. Scott Phillips is a screenwriter, photographer, and the author of 8 novels and a short story collection. His best-selling debut novel, The Ice Harvest, was a New York Times notable book and was adapted as a major motion picture starring John Cusack and Billy Bob Thornton. He is the winner of the California Book Award, as well as being a finalist for the Edgar Award, the Hammett Prize, and the CWA Gold Dagger Award. Scott was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, and lived for many years in France, and he now lives with his wife and daughter in St. Louis, Missouri. And without further ado, if you would please help me in warmly welcoming our fantastic guests for the evening, Gary Phillips and Scott Phillips. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
All right. Well, I am really excited for this conversation. This is the book birthday, and I'm so happy to be here with both of you to help celebrate this book.
Well, thank you, Shane. And thank you to Left Bank Books, and good to see Cousin Scott again.
Yeah. Haven't been in the same room in a while, but
yeah,
see you on the screen.
That's it.
I guess the one thing I want to start with is saying that in addition to, I was raised in Wichita and I did live in France for a while, but I lived in LA for 12 years. And this is a great LA novel.
Thank you.
It really captured a lot of the really complicated cultural of the city. So it hit me in a lot of my sweet spots: historical fiction, photography, crime photography, and it is a murder mystery, but it's a lot more than that. It works on a lot of different levels, and history and politics.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many real people in the book. There are so many like Johnny Otis and
yes.
Tom Bradley. And anyway, I'm assuming you set out to write a crime novel and a historical murder mystery, but there's a lot of really good atmosphere and LA stuff in it.
Well, hopefully, Scott, there is. Yes, I mean the answer would be right. I mean, I set out to write this murder mystery. Well, once I decided on who the character was, and we were talking about this a little before we went on the air, there were 2 influences or inspirations for Harry Ingram. One was a homegrown photographer here in LA named Harry Adams. And Harry Adams was Black, and he shot a lot of stuff for, he wasn't really a crime photographer, but he shot a lot of stuff for the Black press. At that point, in the early 60s, there were 2, actually 3, but the 2 papers I mentioned in this book are the Sentinel and the Eagle, California Eagle, the Black newspapers in town, as well as, and of course, there was Jet Magazine, which was that weekly digest that was always around my house, published by Johnson Publications, who published Ebony. And I also make up a Black men's magazine in this book called Dapper. But that Dapper is actually inspired by an actual Black men's magazine. It only lasted, I think, maybe 5 or 6 issues. It was called Duke. Anyway, all that to say is that Harry Adams, it was a kind of model for Harry Ingram, as well as, of course, some will know of Arthur Felig, aka Ouija, who was around in the 40s and the 50s in New York City, and was this quintessential guy from Central Casting, this little guy from Brooklyn with the accent and the glasses and the cigar hanging out of the side of his mouth. And he had a kind of a mobile, camera, film developing lab in his trunk, and he would drive around to various crime scenes, have his police scanner going, drive around to various crime scenes, photographing some poor guy laying out in the vestibule with a knife in the middle of his head or whatever it was, right? And in fact, he was the inspiration for a late 50s, early 60s show called Man with a Camera with Charles Bronson as the star of that. And then I think later in the 80s, there was a feature film with Joe Pesci, and I'm blanking on the name right now. One of these days I got to look it up. But it was set in the 40s, and Pesci played essentially Ouija. So anyway, both those characters kind of combined to make my Harry Ingram. And then once I had Harry in my head, I figured, well, I had to make it a period piece because, not that photography doesn't exist now, but as we know, it has changed so much with the advent of the smartphone and what that has also wrought, which is kind of interesting. But
in the digital darkroom.
The digital dark.
It doesn't matter if you have the negatives.
That's right. Right. Where it used to be, that was the precious thing, wasn't it? That was, you had to have the negatives and you had to develop and whatever. And then there was always the blackmail scheme, and you always worried, well, did they dupe the negatives? Right. But then I also was just, stumbling around, and I'd gone down some rabbit hole at one point on some other research, and then found out that Martin Luther King, and I knew he had come to LA several times, but I found that in particular he had come to LA that April of '63. This is 4 months before the March on Washington, so it's kind of a big deal. And he's come to LA. In LA, we had our own Wrigley Field. It wasn't not as famous or as monumental, I suppose, as iconic as the one in Chicago, but we had a Wrigley Field. It was in South Central. The Pacific Coast, not the Pacific Coast League, but the Hollywood Stars and some other, and the Angels. The Angels were at that point a AAA ball team. They weren't a pro team. They played there. Anyway, and he spoke at the Freedom Rally there. And so once I knew that was an actual event. And once I had Harry kind of in my head, I thought, well, okay, I can kind of put together a story. And as you mentioned, I wanted to then, knowing it was going to be taking place in a historical time frame, I certainly wanted to try as best I could to sort of capture, that time period, not hopefully in a heavy-handed way, but hopefully in a way that kind of just you roll along with it. As you roll along with Harry, you kind of hopefully then roll along and see those parts of the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also have, when you bring in King, you also have this tension between it's not as if the Black community in LA was monolithic. You have Tom Bradley, who was an ex-cop, who's running, who became mayor, but who's running for city council. You have the Black Muslims.
Yes,
and there's great stuff with them. I mean, there's some great, and then you have King, and you have. So politically, the Black community isn't as I say, monolithic, and you capture a lot of that tension, I think, really, really well.
Well, thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that not that the character is a device, but hopefully the character is whole on the page. But he meets this woman, Anita Claire, and it's also, I think, important to chronicle that at that point, LA is coming out of the Red Scare. May not be quite the term, but certainly the Red Scare is a presence in the book. Certainly, it's not the height, it's not the 50s, but it is certainly a time period in which it's
still there.
It's still there. Yeah, and certainly we see that or there's some of that transition is present within the police force from the Red Squad now to it's becoming something different. In fact, Chief Parker, who's the chief at that point, he called his intelligence division G2, which, using the old Army term for Army intelligence, because he had come out of the service and all that. So that presence is there too. And then we see through Anita, or we get some view through Anita, and we understand from her parents what they had gone through as activists, as fellow travelers, and what that effect has been on them, as well as, of course, now that effect as it plays out in the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm. Also, I found it interesting, and I assume that this is something that real and not something that you cooked up for the book. But I found this very interesting that Tom Parker used to advertise in Southern newspapers for cops.
Yeah, William Parker. Yes, he did. That's actually true.
Yeah. I mean, it's completely true, but I've never heard that, and I find that fascinating.
It's actually it's documented in this great book called by Joe Dominic. It's a history of the LAPD, and it's called "To Protect and Serve: The LAPD's Century of War in the City of Dreams." Yeah.
It's a violent book. It's not. I mean, there are more violent books, but the violence is very. It's realistic and it's never gratuitous.
I hope so. I mean, if one hopes for violence, I guess right. I guess. Well, yes, and I think, or at least I hope, when we pushed Harry to those moments, and I should mention, it has been mentioned that Harry is a Korean War vet, and he suffers from what we would now call PTSD, and in those days, I guess, was called battle fatigue, or even earlier was shell shock. Exactly. And it's not as if, and Harry is a product of his time, so it's not as if he or his buddy who went blind from the war after a mine exploded. They talk about it, and they're haunted by it. And Harry's also haunted by something else that happened during the war. And so, it's not like they would go see, to use the term from those days, a head shrinker, right? But they understand that something is gnawing at them. Something is roiling beneath the surface with them. And neither one of them is a heavy drinker per se, but there's a scene where the two of them are talking, and they're kind of talking a little bit about their nightmares and a little bit about how both of them at two different junctures have a kind of hallucination about Soul City Sue, and this was a real person, just like there was Axis Sally and Tokyo Rose. There was a Soul City Sue who actually turned out to be this white woman from, like, I think, Minnesota, but she was. Anyway, she was living in what became North Korea, and of course then her English was perfect, and so then they would just have her broadcast, out through the speakers, on those lonely nights as a way to try to undermine morale among the GIs.
Yeah, I wondered if she was real. I hadn't heard about her. I my dad was a Korean War vet, and I wished he was still alive so I could ask him if he ever, if he was familiar with that. Yeah, but Korea is an interesting war because it's, to the general public, it's kind of forgotten. It hasn't. There weren't a lot of movies made about it, and that generation, my dad didn't talk about it much until he got very old. And I think a lot of those guys were like that. They were taciturn. They were, they talked about it with each other, but not. Right. He talks about it with the nurse at the hospital, because she was a MASH unit nurse. Right. Exactly. Yeah. My dad was in World War II. Well, actually, my dad and both of his brothers were in World War II. And every once in a while, Pop would say something, or he'd think about, I don't know, I would say something, or, he would just see the kids, when we were kids, just playing war. And I don't know, he might have a point of view about that. And you're right. Sometimes, there's also the stories that I put in the invariably show up in my books, which is to say, he would have his buddies over and they'd have a few beers and they'd be sitting around the kitchen table playing dominoes, and you just hear stories, right? I mean, you're just a kid, so you're just walking by, or I'm in the other room, but you just hear these stories that they're, riffing on with each other, and invariably, man, that stuff is always, it just always stayed with me, Yeah. So I am sort of assuming, and I'm definitely hoping, that this is a character you're going to revisit.
Well, I'm right now writing the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
The sequel starts in the middle of the conflagration that was the Watts riots or Watts uprising, depending on one's political point of view, I suppose, in '65. So we kind of skip ahead about a year and a half from where One Shot leaves off, and literally I start right in the middle, or maybe it's the second day. I think it's Friday the 13th. It's actually the second day of the riot. And Harry's out there just taking his photographs, and of course something happens, and this starts to propel us into the plot for that book. Anyway, really the point I guess I was going to make was that we see some further developments between him and Anita Claire, as well as then we get a little bit more into the, as I mentioned, it's a little bit about the police intelligence apparatus, really just alluded to here in this book, but we get more into that into the second book.
Well, how many Monk books are there?
I wrote 4 Monk books and a series of short stories, and in the back of my head, but moving more toward the front, I'm going to finally get around to writing that 5th Monk book, but I might write the book in the 90s. And one of the reasons I want to write the book in the 90s, well, one, of course, because when I started, I was young enough then when I started writing the Monk books that he and I were roughly the same age. Now, of course, you can't have an old man running around doing the stuff the Monk does, because you'd have a heart attack and a stroke or something. And, that's a problem.
Interesting, though.
Yeah. So, and in the Monk books, his mentor was a cop under Parker, right? And was a World War II vet. So, but a handful of World War II vets around now. I can stretch it a little bit for the 90s, right? I can stretch it a little bit, for the 90s. And so that's another reason, because I need to resolve some stuff between Monk and Dexter Grant. I'm going to, set Monk and his lady love, Jill Kadama, on a certain path. So all that to say is that that's why I think I'm pretty much of a mind that I'm going to put it in the 90s. And probably I'm going to get a little, not to give anything away, because I don't really have it plotted out or anything, but I'm probably going to get a little bit more, not the sci-fi is not right, the word, not the correct term, but get a little more stranger, I think, in that book than I've been in some things. Yeah.
Jed Monk, owner of the Four Aces Garage, is in this book.
Very good. That's right. So that's right. Very good. Very astute reading. Yes. So his dad shows up in this book. His mom is mentioned. His mom is mentioned as a nurse. Or I'm sorry. Jed shows up in this book. In the second book, Jed shows up again. And in that book, Nona, his mom is mentioned. But of course, playing fast and loose with Monk's age, Monk can't be born then, right? I was around then, but Monk can't be around in '65. So I'm fooling somewhat with age and time and what have you. So yeah.
It's nice that they all seem to occur. It all seems to occur in one barely fictional universe,
right?
Because you really, I really loved all the LA stuff, and it's not so much inside baseball that if you're from St. Louis, but I really did think I think you have always gotten LA. You just kind of nailed the vibe.
Well, thank you.
Really well, in a way that not a lot of people writing about LA do, because people want to write about the movie business and the beach and all that.
Well, Harry, but even Harry and Anita go to the beach. They go out to
they go on the roller coaster.
Pacific Ocean Park, which actually did exist in POP. So but even then was starting to, and I sort of allude to this in some description about it. Even then was starting to fall apart.
Well, let's see. What else did I have? I'm a pretty poor interviewer. I read the book and think, I'm going to ask Gary about this, and then it doesn't. It doesn't always jibe. But I love some of the details, like the white front hardware store, not hardware store.
It's a department store.
Department store, and it's all staffed. It's staffed all by white.
There's a few black folks that work in it, but yes. Yeah. But you can't beat that name. I mean, that chain really did exist. I mean,
You can't make that.
You can't make that up. You can't
make that up because if you did, no one would believe it.
That's right. They said, "Oh, that's too on the nose, pal. You gotta take that out."
I accepted without even thinking that it might be something you made up. Because,
but now I will play fair, or I will admit that I made up that location. It wasn't quite located there, but I kind of wanted it at the location, so I put it there.
You needed it to be across from the laundry that's run by
yes, the cleaners that are exactly from the guys that he's looking for. So I kind of need to bring it around exactly.
Yeah. And the blind pig, I forget what it's called, with the
stockyard.
Screw neon sign.
Yeah, well, it's in the plumbing supply outlet. But the stockyard, the blind pig, is upstairs, and his buddy Strummer Edwards, who at one point, in the book, had taken care of the interests for Jack Dragna on the black side of town, runs it among several other, some legal and some illegal enterprises.
Yeah, and a lot of great characters, just minor characters pop up, and they're all really well drawn. And I can't think of her name now, but the woman who's sort of she's a pimp, and where he gets his foot stabbed in her house.
She's not quite. Well, yeah, she is sort of. You're right. She is sort of that. Yes, she is sort of that. But she also has some other interests as well. But yes, that's true. Yeah. Yes, but it does wind up that she helps to supply the party girls to this certain sector of businessmen called the providers. That is true. That's a good point.
And how specific are you with the providers? Because they're sort of like for the audience, the providers are sort of an evil subcommittee of the Chamber of Commerce. And
well, I'll say this, I would tell you this, Scott, and you hear it too from Winston Hoyt, one of the providers. They certainly will not see themselves as evil. They see themselves as patricians, as the ones who are helping to set the tone for society, and have a scheme, have an idea for what that society should look like, and are not necessarily opposed to Black progress, though Black progress at a certain pace, of course. So they see themselves as what would it be? Adam Smith's invisible hand that helps to then, of course, set and guide the true progress, realistic progress for LA, which should in fact will be in their minds the city of the future.
Right, and they sort of reminded me of the interim head of Starbucks talking about unionization. He says, "I'm not anti-union. I'm pro-Starbucks."
There you go.
And I thought that's the provider. Yeah,
that's the provider. That's it, man. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Just they don't think anybody else should have any say in things.
Well, yes. Yeah. I mean, right. There is a certain bourgeois class bias that they do practice. Absolutely. Yes.
I liked your description of all of the publications that Harry contributes to and reads, and Dapper in particular, he learns a skill that helps him in his romantic.
Yes. And in that way, Harry is a forward-thinking man.
Yeah, he is.
Yes.
He is.
Yes.
But I felt I always enjoy one thing. I always enjoy is I write fake newspaper articles for my book. Often I have to take them out because if it was up to me, I would just write a whole book that way.
Right.
But I feel like even if you've never seen an issue of Jet or any of the newspapers, or
Dapper.
You get a feel for what it was like to read those.
That's right.
What they mean when I forget his name, but the owner of the laundry says of Jet, when he says, I might be able to get your laundromat mentioned in Jet. He says, that's that magazine that has pictures of women in swimsuits, and it's nowhere near the ocean.
That's it. That's right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And he just proves, he's like, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And he wants, and Harry wants to get a shot of a cop. He wants to get a shot like this of a cop just about to
just about to crack his head open, because he figures, well, it'll be worth the pain, because I can sell that for the front page or something. Yeah,
right. And it almost happens, and the cop sees his camera and thinks, "Oh yeah, no."
Yeah.
No. He's disappointed.
Disappointed
that he doesn't get this fist in the face, because
there you go,
for some good money.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, Shane has a note for us. He says, "Are we ready for some Q&A? Audience Q&A?" Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Sure.
All right. Thank you both so much. This has been really enjoyable. I love your laugh. Thank you. Yeah. So for the people watching, if you have questions, be sure to type those up now, because we have a few minutes left and we have plenty of time for audience Q&A. But I wanted to ask, first off, you are both kind of connected because of noir, and I'm wondering what you love to play with in the noir genre and what you kind of wish you could scrap. Like, and there's so many things that, like, I feel like you have to have like a private detective and like 13 dark alleys and like so what do you like about the genre, writing in it, and what do you wish you could change?
Let's let Scott go first.
Okay. Well, I don't see it as a genre so much as just kind of a mood. I do get kind of tired of slouch hats and but I don't know. I think what I like is seeing an original book that fits within the genre. And again, I'm kind of uncomfortable with the word genre, because I don't know that it is a genre so much as just a mood. You kind of know it when you see it. And people argue all the time about what noir is. But if I read a book that I feel like is original and something I haven't read before, and that's one of the things I thought about this book. I thought, this is not exactly something I read before. Also, when you talk about detectives, I don't think many detective novels are noir books. It's usually, they restore order.
Yeah.
And, One Shot Harry, he's a photographer. He doesn't want to be a detective. He's a process server, which, gives him a little bit of detective skills, but he's a photographer. He wants to go take pictures of things, make some money. He wants to, he likes women, and he'd like to make a little more money. And he gets drawn into a thing because his friend gets killed, and he owes a debt to his friend because the friend saved his life. Using his skills as a driver, which is why Harry doesn't think, I don't believe that this guy just crashed his car.
Right.
And so I like that. I like the notion that he's drawn into it. And I think that's what a lot of noir is. A lot of noir is people getting drawn into situations that they didn't bargain for. And so anyway, well, hopefully.
I like that. No, I like that. I agree. And certainly, it's funny you brought up Hanisha. I guess in a certain way, she's a kind of femme fatale character, but she really is on the periphery. She's not really, and so that I definitely wanted Anita there, but I wanted Anita cast and portrayed in a different fashion. That she wasn't the good looking dame leading down that path.
Well, she's an interesting character. You could do a book on her.
Yeah. And that she is more his, kind of more, they don't become Nick and Nora Charles. Don't get me wrong,
right.
Which is nothing wrong with that either, by the way. But she's kind of more along the path with him. I mean, she's kind of, and he talks with her about these things, and and she has her own secrets, and so all this, starts to come into play, I guess. So to answer the question, Shane, I think the more, certainly in the modern telling of noir, whether you consider it a mood or a genre, the more you give, to use the modern term, I think female characters of color, gay, straight characters, agency, particularly, characters who haven't had that kind of expression in some of the so-called classic stuff. I think the better we are for it, because it's a more well-rounded, a more wide variety of material to read and to hopefully resonate with on some level.
I asked the question hoping that you would crack the egg and spill. So I'm very happy and satisfied with your answers. Because I really do love the way that crime and mystery and like everything is kind of going right now. And I feel like it's, as someone who's been reading crime and mystery for years since I was young, it feels so much more connected. And I mean, there's so much crime in the world in like anyway. So like, it feels weird to want to read about more crime in a fictionalized way, but in a way that also is putting a voice where there hasn't been a voice before. And so that's what I love about what's happening now in crime fiction.
Oh, good. Yeah. That's true. Very good. Yeah. Good point.
And you take characters who might be you take someone who might be a stock character. And you just invest them with a little bit of humanity, a little bit of weirdness. And all of a sudden they ring true in a way that just having a character who's I want to have a character in this who is, this or that. And you just come there to be this or that and to represent that. And you don't give them anything to do. You don't. My daughter was talking about a TV show today that she's been watching. I won't name it because it really isn't very good. But
now you have to name it.
Now we got to know.
All right, it's Riverdale, which is
all right. Yes.
Which I have.
Not your grandfather's Archie. Apparently,
it's Frank Miller's Archie.
Yes.
But what she was saying is, they'll bring on a black character. And they don't have any storyline. It's just, we don't want Archie not to have any black friends.
That's right. Right.
And they don't have any, they don't have any life to them. And I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I like to take, if I want a character to be in for one reason or another, if I think, I'd like to have a character who's, from Lithuania, whatever. I want to make them interesting and weird in the way that I would make any other character.
Exactly. That's right. That's exactly right.
And I feel that's something in this book. I mean, there's a lot of idiosyncratic minor characters in this book who, I think many of whom could support their own book.
Well, I think to the point that exactly that we want to imbue these characters with some kind of life, some kind of some kind of point of view, so that even if they don't necessarily serve a function, although I think they help to illuminate, Harry's character or Anita's character, but even if they only do that, at least you want to give them some life. And I will say this: a couple of minor characters who are in this first book will show up again in the second book, hopefully a bit more fuller, and hopefully also then building on what has come before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
Scott,
I'm in.
I'm curious if your daughter has watched the Nancy Drew. I forget what it's even called, but there's a Nancy Drew that is similar to the Archie Riverdale, but it's, in my opinion, done way better.
She's kind of hate watching it, and she's also been watching the Vampire Diaries, and she said the weird thing is Riverdale is much more far out than the Vampire Diaries.
That's wild.
So, but yeah, that's I think when you take care and you take your minor characters and you invest them all, and a character walks on, and you can't just say, well, this character, his defining characteristic is he's gay.
You're right.
Yeah. She hated her mother.
Yes.
This character's. You have to wrap all those things up because people are so complicated.
Yeah.
That, and I think that's a problem with a lot of television, a lot of movies, a lot of books, is that, you have characters who have one characteristic.
Yeah.
They don't.
And somehow that defines them. Right.
They don't feel like real people because, well, they're there for a plot reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh shit! I had a question. I had something that was going off of that. I could just keep thinking about the author or the main actress who plays Nancy, her mother is an author, and I feel like that does play help with the development of the story in that way.
Right.
I will advocate for the Nancy Drew.
All right,
I will tell my daughter to watch it.
There we go. It's funny, Shane. I was watching in the first season, and I dropped off. I didn't drop off because I didn't like it. It's just there's only so much I can watch at any one time and keep any of these plots in my head. And then I got sidetracked on something else, and I never got back to it. So I'll have to circle back.
So what are you reading right now that you are really enjoying?
I picked up. Oh, this is great. I was at the Public Library Association conference a couple of weeks ago, and there's a book called The Roach, and it's not a revision of the Kafka story. It's a kind of down and out Batman story where this guy had been, this kind of Batman Punisher vigilante character, and he winds up paraplegic, which would be really, the normal course of events with any
what would
guy.
Actually happen if you tried
if you actually jumped off of rooftops and got beat up every night, and you would. And so this happens to the guy, right? And then he's still, so he's been kind of an alcoholic and kind of down and out and feeling sorry for himself, but kind of slowly, he still kind of has the old instincts. So it's kind of quirky and nice. I kind of quite enjoying it, and he kind of starts to try to get back into the game when, of course, the big menace occurs.
That reminds me, Gary. Do you know Cameron Hughes?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Cameron years ago. Cameron is paraplegic, and he told me years ago he wanted to write a detective novel, and I love this idea. He said he wanted to write a detective novel about a paraplegic detective. And the thing is, he's not inspirational. He's an asshole. Just the worst asshole ever. Because Cameron is so tired of inspiring disabled characters. And I still hope he's going to do it.
I hope he goes back, because The Roach fits that description.
Yeah.
The guy in the chair in The Roach fits that description. Yes, and his friends, what friends he has, says, "Man, why are you such a dick?"
Yeah. And the thing is, typically, if you had a detective in a wheelchair, he'd be a saint.
Exactly,
and that's exactly where you get it wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
People in wheelchairs are
Yeah.
complicated as anybody else.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I hope Cameron does get back to it. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Gary, didn't you write a Batman Joker?
We mentioned earlier with my buddy Krista Faust, we got the gig. Well, actually, Krista got the gig, and she just dragged me along because she felt sorry for me. We did a novelization of the classic Batman Joker graphic novel written by Alan Moore and illustrated by Brian Boland called The Killing Joke. And I'm not giving anything away because if you ain't read it, well, okay. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I think I did read it back like when I was a child. Like,
right.
Yeah. Because it came out how long ago? Like
in the 80s. Like in the 80s. It was like kind of one. It was like on that wave of these first graphic novels. Yeah. And it's very thin. It's not even because I have the original. It's not even 50 pages. Yeah. And in it, the Joker kidnaps Commissioner Gordon and does something terrible to his daughter, although he doesn't know that she's Batgirl. But all this is to drive Commissioner Gordon crazy. But really, it's to make a point, his own weird, crazy point to Batman, right? That anybody can have a bad day and to make him snap and whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you're taking this very thin graphic novel, and now we got to turn it into 80,000 some odd words of prose. So, rather than really give huge, long descriptions of he came into the room, he sat down, he opened a can of beer. We put a front loader to some story that that you don't read in the graphic novel, and of course, then we get more into the characters' heads. And as Krista would tell you, because I've heard her tell this, she definitely wanted to make it that, unlike the graphic novel where Barbara Gordon essentially is almost the shrinking Violet and again has no particular drive. He wanted to make it very clear. She wanted to make it very clear that when this terrible thing happens to her, that she still has drive. She is still, as we were just talking about, that she is now, yes, she will be in a wheelchair, but she will still be this person who had been swinging from the rooftops, who had that kind of sense about herself, and will still have that sense about herself. So, in that regard, I thought we were quite pleased with what we came up with. In terms of that prose version of it.
Didn't Brian Azzarello write an animated version of it?
He did, which was roundly critiqued as it should have been, I think, even though I think Brian Azzarello is a very good writer, where you have that sex scene between Batman and Batgirl, and Batman's old enough to be your daddy, and that's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's wrong.
Well,
even Frank Miller never went there. Come on, man. Come on.
Frank Miller, yeah.
Whew. Whew. Yeah. So, by the way, I'm glad you brought it up, because we asked that of our lords and masters on this project. So, well, we don't have to put in the sex because we really didn't want to. So thank God they said, no, don't do that. So good. Because we don't want to do that. That's terrible because it's not right. Yes. Whew.
Krista Faust, by the way, is a writer you should all be reading.
That's for sure. That's for doggone sure.
She's got a new comic out.
Hit Me.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
Go to your local comic book store and demand it.
Demand it now. Damn it.
Is it a graphic novel?
No, it's a 5-part series, but it'll be collected. Yeah.
So we will eventually be able to have it on our shelf.
There we go.
I'll order it then.
Very good.
Also go to our very classic, very wonderful comic book stores here in St. Louis, because we have a few. Yeah.
Well, we had, in my opinion, the best one in the country, and it's gone now. But
what was it called?
Well, the Star Clipper is still around in some other form.
Yeah.
But it's more of a traditional, comic book store.
Yeah.
I grew up going to a comic book store in the strip mall in the very small town that I grew up in. Go right next to the diner.
My favorites back in the 80s were in strip malls. They were,
Yeah. Scott and I are old enough to remember comics on a spinner rack. So how about that? Yeah. How about that?
Drugstore, the supermarket.
Exactly.
Mom, there's a new Jerry Lewis.
I'm not buying you that crap.
Yeah.
That's right. That joke.
All right. Well, we have people watching, but just a quiet. They're enjoying the conversation, so which I am as well. But you did you have an answer for great books that people should be reading right now, Scott?
Well, I just read one. It's not a new book, but I just read "Shot in the Heart" by Michael Gilmore. It's a family memoir. I think it's the best memoir I've ever read.
Wow.
It's a crazy book about a tragic family, and it's full of
his brother, right?
His brother was Gary Gilmore, but that's
Gary Gilmore,
the whole book. For those of you who are not familiar with it, Gary Gilmore was he committed a couple of really senseless murders. They were committed during robberies, but there was no reason to kill anybody, and he wanted to be executed, and he forced the state of Utah to execute him back shortly after the Supreme Court. This is maybe 10 years after the Supreme Court had said it was unconstitutional, and that as currently states would have to. Anyway, he forced the state of Utah to execute him, and this was terrible for Michael, who was the youngest brother in this family of 4 brothers, but just it's an amazing book, and it's not a downer.
Wow. Yeah.
And right after it, I picked up Gore Vidal's Palimpsest because I had read a little piece of it years before, and I wanted to read another memoir, and it just really irritated the shit out of me. He's just such an arrogant bastard. Let's see.
You're probably not the first person to say that. No, gotta guess.
Gary, Shelley MacArthur was a friend of Gore Vidal's. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, Shelley MacArthur used to manage the mystery bookshop in LA.
In LA, that's right.
And great guy. He might be watching tonight. I don't know.
That's right. That's it.
But he was friends with Gore Vidal, and
I'll be damned.
He had stories. I have been reading Cameraman, whose author I forget. I'm sorry. She's a film critic, and it's about Buster Keaton. And
right on.
Oh, yeah.
Really good book.
Yeah. I would read that. I've always been kind of fascinated by that guy.
Yeah. It sets him in the context of his time. And the interesting things about him, I thought, was that late in his life, he died in 1966, but around 1964, somebody said, "Do you ever see any old, Hollywood, the old stars?" And he says, "Well, I get together with them once in a while, but they're not very connected to the modern world." He says they've never listened to the Beatles.
Yeah,
that's kind of fascinating.
That's cool. Yeah, man, that's great.
He listening to the Beatles on purpose,
right?
Because he was fascinated with the world he lived in, and ways it was changing, and he always had been, and that was why he always kept up with technology. People forget that there's always this story that he was this tragic failure after the silent years, which is true to a degree, although he always worked.
Yes,
big famous, but he was kind of a big deal on television in the 50s and 60s.
Yes, that's right.
He was always, and if he had stayed more famous, I think he would have been a huge television star.
Yeah. It's funny when you see, early pictures of him. He was a handsome guy, man. Because you just remember him as this old guy.
Right.
I think I first became aware of him in like a funny thing happened on the way to the forum.
Right.
Remember? Yeah. And then I somehow reeled back from that, and then would see him this or that, and I go, "Oh, I know that guy."
We're watching The Silence, and they're amazing movies.
Yeah. Yes.
They're funny, but they're not just funny. They're kind of amazing movies anyway. I mean, he could have made horror films or westerns, and they still would have been amazing, I think.
Right.
The book that I can't stop talking about that you both might actually really enjoy. It's and it's called Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen that comes out in June.
Oh.
And it's about a counterfeit like purse, like counterfeit handbag ring. And it is, I mean, it's globe trotting, like it is really unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
like,
and Shane doesn't get into the whole sort of bootleg, knockoff industry. Oh, I got to read that because I'm totally. Like years ago, I tried to. In fact, I pitched it a couple of times. I tried to pitch a comic book series, and in fact, I called it knockoff. I think, or bootleg. I called it bootleg because I'm totally fascinated by that. Because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in and of itself.
I'm fascinated by any kind of counterfeiting or fakery, whether it's art or money or consumer goods. I think just having the kind of skills that it takes to credibly fake something,
right,
and use those skills instead of making something of your own or going out and doing legitimate work. I find that fascinating, and I think if I could be if I had the skills to be a forger, I think I would be.
There you go. There's in that lovely glossy soap opera, House of Gucci from was it last year already? Yeah, last year. There's a great scene though where there's a scene where they got all the counterfeit Gucci stuff, handbags and scarves, whatever, right? Laid out. And they're talking about what are we going to do? We got to come down on these people and this and that. And the Pacino's characters says, "No, what are you kidding? This is extending the brand. This is no man. Leave these people alone."
Yeah.
Shoot.
Definitely check it out. It is
right on. Counterfeit, excellent.
Wild. It's so
the last 3 books you've laid on me, Shane, I've really enjoyed.
Oh,
good.
They're all
great. That's great.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward. That's good.
There are some other local authors, Scott, that will not agree with you. I mean, sometimes I'm really far off base. Because I read a lot I read for the pleasure of reading.
Right on.
There's some local
only reason to read.
Yeah. There's some people that they read for embracing the craft and learning about, and there's definitely an element of that too, and to appreciate it.
Where I get stuck is where I read somebody and I can feel them writing. I like it, and it doesn't mean that those are bad books. It just means that I'm paying more attention to what they're doing stylistically than I am to. Well, that kind of sounds like I just want to read for plot, which I really don't. But if I'm reading someone and just thinking, why is he doing that?
Mm-hmm.
I think it hasn't been done well enough for me to just
move along. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to first off thank you both so much, Scott. I can't wait until we actually get to see each other again in person. Gary, I hope I get to meet you soon. This has been really enjoyable evening.
I want to thank you guys. This is great, man. This is a blast.
And I also want to thank everyone watching tonight. Thank you for coming out, for tuning in, and we hope to see you again really soon.
There you go. All right, you guys.
You both.
Be well.
See ya. You too.